Today's lesson, we're going to talk about ratio word problems, and we've done many word problems in class before. So many of you are used to the four-step problem solving method, or you've developed your own methods that work for you. So I encourage you to use a strategy that works best for you. The problems that we're going to see today could just be regular old ratios where we're building up, or they could be unit rates. So we want to be on the lookout for if we're finding a unit rate, if we're going to be using 1 in our proportion, or if we're going to be using larger numbers like we saw in ratio tables and proportions. Let's get started. So the 4 steps to solving ratio word problems or word ratios. The first thing is we want to identify and write a word ratio. I talked a little bit about word ratios in my unit rate lesson where we were comparing something in my numerator, so it was students, and then something in my denominator, which was teachers, and we wanted to make sure we stayed consistent between the numerators and denominators. This will make sure you don't switch anything around and change the ratios, which will lead you to the incorrect solution. Then we want to set up a proportion, solve that proportion, and many of us are using cross product. I love seeing that you're using cross product because I think it's great to help you practice your one-step equations. Some of you like to use equivalent fractions or building those fractions up with a common factor. That's fine as well. I think cross product is a very great algebraic way of solving, so I think it's a great way to show your work. And then finally, we're going to write our answer in a complete sentence as we would all word problems. So make sure you're including your proper labels. For our first word problem, we are mixing paint. So it says the LHS colors are made by mixing blue and yellow paint in the ratio of 2 to 3. Notice how I'm reading the ratio as 2, 2, 3. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we know that that colon means 2. How much blue paint needs to be mixed with 12 gallons of yellow. So we're looking at the ratio of 2 to 3, but we're dealing with 12 gallons of yellow paint. So we're going to have to build up that blue paint as well. So we know in this situation, we are comparing the amount of blue paint to the amount of yellow paint. And if you want to write this as a word ratio, I do encourage you to make sure you write it as a fraction. So you can go ahead and put your fraction bar across here. We're going to set up a proportion. So we want to make sure that everything in the numerator is related to blue paint and everything in the denominator is related to yellow. So we know our original ratio was 2 to 3. So we're going to use that ratio of 2 to 3. 2 gallons of blue to 3 gallons of yellow. Again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw that fraction bar just because it's difficult on here. And then we're solving for how many gallons of blue paint to 12 gallons of yellow. So what I did here is I stayed consistent with 12 in my denominator with yellow paint, but we're solving for the amount of blue paint up top. So many of you probably already know the answer, and you can build 3 up to 12 and then do the same thing with 2 as you would with common factor. We're going to solve that proportion. So what I would do is use cross product. I think it's the coolest, most professional way to show it, but again, it's what's comfortable for you. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply 3 times x, giving me 3x, and 2 times 12, giving me 2 times 12 down here, which we all know is 24. Then we're going to solve using inverse operations. So I know if 3 is being multiplied to x, then the inverse operation is division, so we'll divide both sides by 3, leaving us with x equals 8. Because 3 divided by 3 gives us 1, we're left with 1x. We don't need to write that coefficient of 1. We all know it's there. And then 24 divided by 3 is 8. So if we write our answer in a complete sentence, we will write something like 8 gallons of blue paint are needed to be mixed with 12 gallons of yellow. So this is what I'm looking for when you're doing these problems today. Writing your word ratio, writing your original ratio, what you're building to, or in some cases for unit rates, simplifying down to. Solving that proportion, if you use cross product, it should look like this. If you're using common factor, then you want to show what factor you multiplied by to get there. So in this situation, you would multiply by 4. So 3 times 4, you're going to show that. And then 2 times 4 will give you 8. So you want to show that in your proportion. And then writing your answer in a complete sentence. So if you're using Kami, or another PDF editor, this is what your work should look like with a complete sentence. So here we have our second word problem, and I'm going to have you guys work on this one. It says, Mr. Johansson took his family on a car trip. His average speed was 55 miles per hour, MPH, we often see on street signs. How long will it take him to travel 643 and a half miles to their destination? So we want to use that 4-step procedure to solve. And then, of course, in class, people love to do this, so I'll click the car for you because it runs away really fast. So I set this up on my page with 4 steps, but again, if you have a different strategy that is more comfortable for you, please use that. Okay. The thing I did for this word problem is we have 55 miles per hour. So we know if it's miles per hour, we're talking about 1 hour. So I crossed it out and I just wrote in 1 hour. So we knew that this is actually a unit rate that's given to us, 55 over 1. We already have the speed per hour, miles per hour. So it says, how long will it take him to travel 643 and a half miles to their destination? So what are we comparing what to what? What's our original word ratio? So in this situation, we are talking about miles per hour. So we have miles in our numerator and hours in our denominator. And we're given the unit rate of 55 miles per hour. So we know that information already. So I'm going to use that as my rate. So I'm taking that 55 over 1, and I want to build up to 643 and a half miles. Now I want to make sure, since we have 643 and a half miles in the numerator, it belongs in the numerator of my proportion. So we have 643 and a half. But then we need to determine what is the amount of time that is going to take. So we'll call that X. Or I know for some of you, you like to relate it to the problem, so I'm going to use T for time. This is your proportion. So what I want you to do now is go ahead and solve this problem. I want to know how long will it take them to get to their destination. That is 643 and a half miles away. When you're done, please write that in a complete sentence and send it to me through GoGuardian, and we can check how you did. Then you're off to today's assignment. You will submit through Schoology. Make sure to check your answers before you submit. Bye.